This is the first in a three-part series of resources that consider international trade. Part 1 provides definitions for terms related to international trade, focusing on the concept of protectionism. Part 2 answers the question of when trade makes sense through the lens of a simplified example. Part 3 considers the exchange rates for trading currencies from different nations and what effects changing those rates have on the balance of trade. An export is a good produced in some home country that is sold in a foreign country. Similarly, an import is a good produced in a foreign country but sold in the home country. For example, suppose American dairy farmers sell milk in Canada. The milk would be considered an export for the United States and an import for Canada. There is money transferred in the process of exporting and importing goods. On a more macro view, however, imports are ultimately paid for by exports. There is a fine balancing act in international trade, as countries bring in some amount of imports with the expectation that an approximately equal amount of goods going the other way as exports. Not only can goods move from country to country, so can the process of creating those goods. Outsourcing is when some domestic home firm shifts part of its production to another country. At first glance, this is bad for the home nation. It represents a loss of jobs. However, outsourcing is a normal part of a healthy economy. The loss of jobs may also be partially offset by insourcing, jobs coming the other way. The single greatest benefit of outsourcing is the cost savings. Companies only move production to another location if the cost savings are considerable. Lower costs means the product is able to be sold for lower prices, which increases consumption of the product. Therefore, the company is much better off financially. Often, countries want to quote unquote win international trades. They want to make sure that they export more than they import. This leads to protectionism, which are official policies and taxes that are used to limit the quantity of imports into a country. The exact way that quantity is limited may take many different forms. One protectionist policy is to place import quotas. These are actual limits on numbers of imports allowed into a nation. However, international law decrees that import quotas are illegal. Another possible form of protectionism is a voluntary export restraint. Here, the exporter simply decides to send less product. This decision is nominally voluntary, but would often be the result of pressure from the importing nation and constant negotiation. Protectionism may also take the form of import licenses. This is protectionism in reverse. Instead of actually limiting the imports, it limits the number of sellers allowed to sell those imports. Domestic sellers must have government licenses to import goods from other nations and then sell those products. Don't want a lot of imports coming into your country? Don't give out the licenses, then the imports cannot be sold in the domestic country. One final protectionist action is the creation of tariffs. Tariffs are taxes placed on imports. This is the most common form of protectionist actions governments take. But does protectionism really help a nation's economy? What are the effects of protectionism? The immediate effects of protectionism are the desired results. The amount of imports from that nation are limited. However, the trade partner will respond in kind, starting a trade war or at least a trade skirmish. In retaliation, the trade partner will often limit the amount of exports they will accept into their nation. So while the net exports portion of the gross domestic product is improved by the decrease in imports, it is also harmed by the corresponding drop in exports. Also, the relationship between the two nations gets negatively impacted. But why do nations trade in the first place? Stay tuned for the next resource in the series.